with money.
Yes, we did.
That's another way to think about it. We did.
Where does it come from? Do you just print it?
We print it digitally, and we do that by buying treasury bills. That actually increases the money supply.
Financial Turmoil Explained.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the show on this October the 17th, 2022, a Monday. Thank you for tuning in. I'm glad to have you guys here. I want to take a look at this article by Austin Fitts. And it's warning that the Fed actions are 100% power politics, she says. She says it's a war. Yeah, it's an economic war going on behind the scenes. And one of the points that she brought out here that she emphasized, and I mean, it's something that I never really considered until I read this article, that she thinks that they are going to continue to keep raising interest rates, and they're going to keep playing a hard hand, the Fed, here, because they have to in order to support the dollar. Let me read some of the main points here. She says, if you look at the money being pumped out on climate change and green energy, environment, and all these, all theses, and all these different new sort, it seems it's dependent on how they inject the money. It says either way it could turn into a bear market. It says, she says, I think they're going to keep raising interest rates. If you're the Federal Reserve and you're playing a global game, and what you have to do is protect the reserve currency status. Another high point here is it says they are doing everything they can to collapse the market share of the euro and then move that into the dollar syndicate. She says, I think they have to keep driving the dollar up. They have the entire frontier market and emerging markets in a bear trap, and that's a very significant power. She also says, so I think the Fed is going to keep doing this for some time now. They don't mind, as you learned from the pandemic, collapsing small business side of the economy and collapsing the middle class. Says, what you are looking at is fundamental re-engineering of the governance system of planet Earth. Because we're at wartime, things are changing really fast. I think that's what she's pointing out here. And they're doing things that normally they wouldn't do during peacetime within the financial system. I think that's what she's trying to point out. She says they're going to protect that enormous benefit that they get from it being the world reserve currency, and they are going to protect that benefit, she says. If they don't protect that benefit, they run the risk of everybody moving out of the channel, what she calls the channel. The channel is the means of payment around the world. She says this is what the Chinese or Russians are trying to do. In other words, undermine the dollar as the petrodollar. And this is a war on many fronts. It's not just a war on the ground that we see evidence of in Ukraine. It's also a war going on behind the scenes in the financial system that started with the economic war with China. It's an extension of that. And right now, I think the point she's trying to make is that the United States government is trying to preserve the petrodollar and trying to preserve the system that we have in place that allows the dollar to be the world reserve currency. And this is what it's about with the Fed, and they're sticking to this, still raising interest rates and stuff, and they're not going to stop until they get a crisis, a monumental-sized crisis that forces them to stop. And so what we're going to see is an erosion of the liquidity within the system, and until they decide to stop. And we could actually see the system implode upon itself. A credit crisis coming directly ahead. And they're not going to stop until after we get this credit crisis. But the credit crisis could freeze everything down. And I think we're getting very close to it. We're very close to the verge of it. Let's take a look at the silver price today. It's up 38 cents at 1867 today. Let's take a look at gold. Gold is up $15.20 at 1660. Let's take a look at cryptos today. See what they're doing. Bitcoin's at 19,476 and Ethereum's at 1,325. Bitcoin really doesn't want to go down under 18,000. But, if the Fed keeps pushing the way they're pushing, it could trim off a little bit more than where it is right now, and so could gold and silver. But ultimately, there's a fear trade that can come in for gold and silver that we might not see with Bitcoin, because gold and silver is the key support, a foundational support of the entire global economic system. And ultimately, they're also using this as part of the weapons system, Russia and China. With their hoarding gold for all those years, and the West doesn't have a lot of gold. But the West got Bitcoin. That's our fool's gold, that we'll use over here, and they'll have real gold over in China and in the Far East, Russia and China and all that, but we'll have fool's gold over here. We'll have the Bitcoin. And who knows? I mean, this is such a crazy world that fool's gold might end up being worth more than real gold. Well, it already is. I mean, one Bitcoin's worth $19,000. I remember back years ago when Bitcoin first overtook gold. Like an ounce of gold and one Bitcoin. For the longest time, one Bitcoin was cheaper than an ounce of gold. And then it overtook an ounce of gold. And it's never looked back. And it's still far higher for one Bitcoin than it is for 1 ounce of gold. But anyway, getting back on to what we're talking about here, taking a look at the Dow Jones today, which is up 429 points. So we're back up above 30,000. We're hanging in there on a wing and a prayer, and the Fed, they're just going to keep trouncing until they get a crisis of some sort. It's going to turn them around at this point, because they're hot on to what's called fight inflation right now, but it's really about perseverance of the dollar. It's really about protecting the dollar's hegemony in the world as being the world reserve currency and keeping that in place while we're at wartime so that they can effectively squeeze down the Eastern world. So it's putting a squeeze on the Eastern world, and by holding the dollar secure, and how they keep it secure is by tightening on the dollar, so that the dollar is the best of the fiat currencies out there. It maintains its purchasing power if you're tightening. It's the dollar milkshake theory, basically. But as soon as you stop tightening and you go back to loose monetary policy, the dollar's going to die now at this point. And don't you think they don't know it? So they're desperate to stay the course. And what does that mean for all of us? A depression. It means a depression's coming. And soon. And it's only going to last until the crisis gets to a point where the Fed can't tolerate it any longer. It's just too bad, and they got to loosen up the purse strings again. And that will happen. But how deep in depression are we going to be? Okay, taking a look now at crude oil at 86.25. It's up 64 cents on the day. Move index today. Move index is at 152.89. You can see it's steadily been going up over the course of the year. This is an indicator of what the stability is in the credit markets. And the higher this number goes, the more unstable the credit markets are. And as you can see, it's really went a long way in the last year up. Taking a look at the U.S. Bonds and rates, we're looking at fall in yields. We're looking at 3.97 on the U.S. 10-year and 3.975 on the U.S. 30-year. So the U.S. 10-year and the U.S. 30-year is almost exactly the same rate. In fact, they are exactly the same. 3.975 on both of them. Isn't that something? Anyway, we're down 5.2 basis points on the U.S. 10-year. Now it's changed a little bit, I think. No, it hasn't. But anyway, taking a look at the U.S. dollar index today is at 112.22. And they're probably going to try to keep this above 110. As long as they can. No matter what happens to our economy. No matter how many jobs are lost. No matter how many businesses fold. No matter how low the stock market goes, well, I shouldn't say that. There's a point where it's going to freeze everything, and I've told you guys what that point is. What I think it is. It's around 22,000. It goes below that. The whole system's going to just lock up. And a credit is just going to dry up within the system, and the system ain't going to be able to function. It's almost like when you drain all the blood out of a person, what do you expect? They're going to keel over. And that's the way with the system. Drain all the liquidity out of it, and it's going to keel over, guys. Anyway, listen, guys, bad times. This is war time right now. There's a big war going on over in Ukraine. If you guys haven't heard about it, most people have, unless they've been living in a cave, you know. And what it's done is it's made all of the nations around the earth are kind of on edge. Really on edge. And there's a big war going on behind the scenes with the financial system as well. You know, it's about time mankind got over this whole thing of war. It's a sucker's game for everybody involved. It's something that's come from our society when we were more uncivilized, you know, and it's a sucker's game. It's a mug's game. It's something that nobody can win on either side. Nobody ever wins in it. It's just complete and utter loss for everybody involved. It brings an awful lot of sorrow with it. And it touches everybody on earth in one way or another. It's horrible. Anyway, thank you guys for listening. Like and subscribe, and we'll catch you guys in the next show. Bye-bye.